Again, thanks everyone for coming today. Really appreciate it. We're going to talk a little bit about your transition to SAP S4. I know obviously it's a hot topic now. I think a lot of people are either in the process or they've already gone down the path, and there's many things going on. So we're going to be talking today about basically building that foundation for success. A little bit over from an agenda perspective. Obviously, welcome. My name is Dan Chase. I'm an enterprise architect with R2i. We will then go through, I'll give you a quick, I would call it the quick commercial break at the beginning. A little bit of overview of who R2i is. And then we'll kind of get into the meat of it. Really focus on kind of key considerations when you're considering the platform of choice for your S4 transition and move implementation. I will then pass it over to my other speakers, who I'll introduce shortly from SUSE, and then we're going to do a bit of a closeout and a follow-up. So myself, my name's Dan Chase, Enterprise Solution Architect. I'm with R2i. Some of you, I think we've probably met in the past. I spent a little bit of time at IBM as an SAP lead from a platform perspective, along with actually spent some time at SAP. I am based out of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, mainly focused in the federal and public sector space. With me on the line, and I'll let them introduce themselves when I pass it over to them. We have Al Calathian. He's a Linux engineer with SUSE, and we also have Mike Nelson, a partner executive for SAP, specifically focused on SAP and SUSE from a platform perspective. So R2i, who we are. Some of you may have heard of us, some of you might not have. So we are a Canadian business based out of Montreal. We've been in business for about 11 years. We also have a cloud offering. We're probably one of Canada's most certified all-Canadian cloud offering. We started off with 3 employees. We're now over 65. The focus on most of these employees are actual delivery and hands-on folks. So out of that team of 65, you would probably say 99% of us are basically hands-on. We've got technical architecture background. It's one of the key differentiators of our organization. If we look at the offerings R2i has, obviously one of the focuses is the IT infrastructure. We do end-to-end IT service from cloud computing all the way to on-prem. We have offerings around managed services. We have offerings around IBM i development, as well as application services, and then digital transformation. So moving from manual processes into the digital age. From a procurement perspective, I know this probably more relates to those of you who are with the Canadian federal space. We are on the PISA, specifically for various hardware vendors. We also are on the SALSA. We partner up with the software vendors. From a delivery or services perspective, we are listed on TBIPs as well as ProServe. So some of the examples R2i can help deliver from that perspective is to augment teams. We generally, as when I talked about earlier, right, we have 65 employees, so we tend to basically take a team perspective in that the delivery is really done together, and we kind of help the organizations move their projects along. So things are focused on specifically in the federal space is around AI, so innovative framework build-outs, AI lab design and architecture. We've done some work on the Digital Earth Canada platform architecture. So we have a lead there that has participated with a few of the departments on this, as well as focused on my background around architecture advisory services around ERP and the platform that you go to. One of the key things in the last few years, right, and we probably see a lot of this, is R2i has a cloud offering. It's 100% Canadian. There are 5 data centers, probably the most certified cloud in Canada, even over some of the larger folks. We have offerings around public cloud as well as private, dedicated, or even customized cloud, which kind of is is very unique in that space, and that we're able to expand those offerings out. So we can also provide things like backup services, cloud backup, cloud recovery. So if you continue to run systems on-prem, you can also maybe just use the offering around doing backup services to a cloud provider rather than having to move the whole system over to cloud. But again, that's the way we work from a hybrid perspective. We have performance archiving services. We can, from a connection perspective between the data on-prem data centers and cloud, we can do fiber point-to-point, MPLS, RITM, or even VPN links, depending on what works for the environment, specifically around any security environments, etc. And of course, as I already briefly chatted about, is we do offer IT consulting and professional services. Okay, if we kick in, that's kind of the end of the R2i commercial per se, but if you have any further questions, my email, as well as generic emails will be available at the end. You'll have the link. If you don't already have my email, it will be there. You can reach out and we can go into more detail around how we might be able to help from that perspective. So the reason we're here. Most of you, and again, happy that you were able to join us. I think you're at the point where you've either gone to S4, you're moving to S4, right? And really, there's some key considerations you want to really look at, especially around public sector, right? One of the big ones is, of course, I would almost call it the security of your SAP assets, right? If we're deciding where we're going to run them, we also want to be able to make sure, are the systems patched? Do they have access? Do they have the latest patches, the security patches? One of the other challenges a lot of times is our SAP systems are most likely not directly connected to the internet. So how do we deal with that? And do we bring in update servers internally, put them in the DMZ in order to get those updates across onto our SAP systems? So we want to start to think about things like that. What's our cloud strategy? Everybody's going to cloud in some shape or form, right? And we'll start to see from an industry perspective more hybrid, because maybe we do move part of the SAP system to cloud, but there might be data that's still contained on-prem. Maybe we don't move everything. So we want to decide on our cloud strategy. Is it just SaaS? Are we just going to be are we doing the full end-to-end, i.e., I will name it, do we do RISE in this case? So full software availability managed by SAP, updated by SAP, etc. Or maybe we're only going to do a transition state where we do IaaS, where we maybe are going to take our SAP system and we will continue to run it ourselves. We will continue to manage it ourselves for various reasons, which come up in the next 2 points, and we do infrastructure as a service with Azure or AWS or one of your cloud providers, right? Additionally, some of the SAP systems may continue to stay on-prem, right? So really, you want to decide early on where the systems are going to run as you go forward or as you transition. So you're going to balance your flexibility, your control, as well as your risk. Sovereignty and compliance, of course, we know this has become a huge thing, right? For us here in Canada, pretty much around the world, right? We got to be careful around, i.e. the Patriot Act with the data if we're going to put the data in the cloud, if we decide to put it on IaaS or we decide to put it on RISE, right? Where is the data sitting? Who has access to the data? Is it sitting in a Canadian data center? That's one thing. That's great. Most big cloud providers do have Canadian data centers, but what about the local staffing? Do they have the SAP expertise local in Canada that have been security cleared, right? So you have to take all those considerations before you say, yeah, I want to do this or I want to do that. So taking that into consideration, right? We want to be able to, what about controlling those upgrades, that upgrade cycle, right? What happens when one of the things with some of the offerings out there is, yes, now SAP or third party is going to manage the environment. What happens when when a new enhancement pack comes out and you have to patch the system? Well, guess who's responsible for testing, because that system's connected to various other non-SAP systems. In most cases, that falls onto the customer. So keeping that in mind, so we still have a lot of work that we need to do, and we want to be able to control when those updates happen. So how do we do that? Well, this is what we're going to be talking about today, a couple of tools that are available from SUSE that will actually help you. One of them is Trento. Trento is really a system security monitoring system. It is actually included in your SLES license. So if you're running SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for SAP today, you actually have access to this capability. There's no additional cost to you. If you happen to be using the other platform that we probably won't talk about today, you may not have this capability, but this is going to show you the art of the possible of what if you were running this on SLES. Okay, so you have also, so that's for system monitoring. You deliver continuous health vulnerability reporting. Okay, it ties into SAP Tune, which my colleague Al will talk a little bit more about it later, right? And the idea is not just to do reporting once, it's about continuously reporting and tracking of the systems and how they're configured. Do you have the proper enhancement packs? Do you have the security pieces in there? It allows you to do support proactive mitigation, right? And you're always ready for security audits, which it's become very important. Number 3, SAP Integration Suite. A lot of us are considering the integration suite, the Edge integration cell for SAP. Why? Because we want to continue to run, we want the movement of the data to stay in-house. We need the movement of data to stay in our data center. We can't either because it hasn't gone through the PBMM assessments yet. We don't know where the data goes when i.e. integration suite from SAP BTP is moving the data around. Where does it go when it goes between system A and system B? So SAP recognized this. They came out with the integration cell. Well, guess what? That means you have to choose a platform to run it on. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The fourth point here is really aligning to the Canadian regulatory needs, right? So need to support deployment in a Canadian data center at a minimum, and as well as compatible, you're running local staffing who have been through the clearance, right? So that's become very important for us in the public sector space to consider. So with that, I've kind of laid the groundwork of kind of where we are from a positioning perspective. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass it over to my friends at SUSE, and who's going to actually talk about the technology that will help you do this. And over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Dan. I think we'll move pretty quickly from this to the next deck from SUSE. Good morning, everybody. And just quickly by way of introduction, my name is Mike Nelson. I work for SUSE. I'm about 10 years in here, so I've been here a while. But even longer in the SAP space, I've worked for Hewlett-Packard, now called HPE, and for Sun Microsystems before that in this enterprise business application space. My role here at SUSE is more of the setup man today for the technical audience that we hope you guys are tuning in for. Al Kalafian will introduce himself in a moment, but has long been involved in all of your most pressing issues from a deployment standpoint, particularly with SAP. So I want to thank the R2i team for allowing us to do this and for drawing you all to this presentation. We're happy to answer any questions you have afterwards as well. Also, I forgot to mention I'm in the U.S. Don't hold that against me right now. I'm in the Boston area and a frequent visitor up to all places in Canada. Al, if you go on to the next slide, we'll cut to the chase here in a bit. Okay, so I start with this, SUSE for SAP, it's a thing. Really just want to get to the heart of this. We're in a situation with SUSE and SAP that we've been friends and partners for a long time. If you go to the next slide, Al, it's started at about the year 2000 when SAP started to realize, hey, this open source stuff, particularly Linux, looks really interesting. We've been waiting in line for operating system upgrades and enhancements for years from the Unix vendors, from IBM with mainframe, every other platform, even Windows. So now we can kind of be in control of our own destiny a little bit more and they jumped right into the Linux space. We are a German-based company, headquartered in Nuremberg, and there were some personal relationships that got some traction for us immediately. Fast forward a bit, SAP was integral in getting this SUSE business really kicked off. They were the first to allow SAP workloads to run in production on Linux. And as early as 2012, when the HANA platform was introduced, SUSE was chosen to be the Linux platform for deployment of HANA. So SAP had a conundrum at that point. They wanted their database to succeed right off the bat, and they didn't want problems with infrastructure, operating system, hardware, firmware, storage, networking to disrupt that. So they locked it in pretty tight, and we were part of that initial setup for quite a number of years. They've now since allowed HANA to run on Red Hat Linux as well. So they're our primary competition in that space. Our attention and our success in this market, we've become market leaders. And early on, we decided, hey, the thing people most care about with the database is just high availability. It's got to always be running. Of course, if the database isn't available, your system's not available. You can't transact, you can't report, etc. So we really focused for several years on almost only that, making the HANA database robust and secure, and just sort of enterprise ready, I guess, for SAP applications. Then we kind of turned our attention, kept that nice ingredient going. Then we turned our attention to, okay, what's next? What can we apply SUSE talent and engineering to that would make a difference to an SAP customer? And the next thing was, let's simplify life for SAP administrators. Al's going to talk quite a bit about that today with SUSE Manager and Trento, and some other things we've done there. Following closely after that, we knew that we could help with security of SAP systems, especially at a time when some of them are under attack by the bad guys. And we had certain abilities there that we had developed, and now we applied them to SAP workloads. Then we went back to high availability, but this time for the central services. And we've done 100 things in between, but those are sort of the focus areas as they stand right now. We have also been pushing SAP and following them closely with their look at running containerized workloads, taking advantage of cloud native technologies, and keeping up with that whole development in the enterprise IT marketplace. So now we've launched Rancher for SAP applications. Rancher is the Kubernetes distribution and toolkit that we offer. We purchased this company about 4 years ago. They were wildly successful outside of the SAP realm, and now we're applying that to SAP as they come out with things like the Edge integration cell and digital manufacturing Edge. So those applications are meant to run in containers and not in VMs. So we're right there ready with SAP to support that. They've already blessed and approved our Rancher for SAP for that purpose. Then last thing I'll talk about here is we've achieved market leadership. We've done this through very careful attention to SAP, almost uniquely. We don't give this attention to other software ecosystems, software vendors. We don't have people with Oracle in their title here at SUSE. We don't have people with Windows or Splunk or Snowflake in a title here. We support all those things, of course, but we really do focus on SAP, and that's been a strong suit. Going to the next slide, I'll just wrap this part. Your partners of choice in the public cloud, on-premises hardware, your system integrators that you all know and love are SUSE partners as well. And this is not a new phenomenon. We've been working with these companies for a long time. Go ahead, Al, and thank you for flipping slides for me. Okay. All right, now we'll move on to Al. He'll do a quick intro and we'll be off. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, sorry, the slides are kind of going crazy there, and they went blurry for some reason. I don't know what the heck's going on. But anyway, yeah, so hi everybody. My name's Al Khalefi, and I'm been with SUSE about 4.5 years, but have been working in the SAP space since 1995 with the IBM SAP Competence Center when SAP was just in a little building down by the Philadelphia airport. And been working in that space, like I said, ever since. So 30 years working in the SAP in a technical type of role. IBM and then Lenovo as part of the Intel server acquisition, and worked here in the US, worked in Germany for 5 years at the at SAP headquarters in Waldorf. So long history with SAP, and I work very closely with Mike as kind of his technical resource, if you will. So some of the things we're going to talk about here is, when you're getting started or you're already started, your journey into cloud or Rise or wherever it is you're going, want to make sure you do things right the first time, right? So you don't have to go back and change anything, redeploy, reimage, those sorts of things, because that happens all the time. And there's some new tools and there's some new ways of doing things, particularly in the clustering area, that are, you know, that belong in a 2025 type of environment. And so those are some of the things we're going to talk about, and some of the tools that we include with SLES for SAP. So I'll just briefly mention here, SUSE is a development platform for SAP. And so why does that matter? And by the way, I was there in working in Germany in 1999 when the Linux lab opened, and SUSE was there from the very beginning. But why is that important? So when, a new version comes out of NetWeaver or of HANA or whatever, it's been burned in and tested and, basically put through the ringer prior to going GA. And then, some of the other folks are going to have to play catch up. But since it's developed on SLES for SAP, um, there'll be no surprises during GA. Why does it say start my video? Well, anyway, this is a weird platform. Sorry. So like it says here, tens of thousands of SAP customers run on SUSE. No doubt Red Hat has a huge presence in the United States, but when it comes to SAP, SUSE has the lion's share of the customers running SAP on our Linux platform. And one of the ones here that I find most interesting is the 95% of the HANA installations on IBM Power that are running SUSE Linux. So no need to explain that. I'm sure you can tell where I was going with that, but I'll just leave it at that. SAP is a reference customer for SUSE and vice versa. They run their business on SUSE Linux. We run our business on SAP, and so it's been a very tight partnership, and that really has us developing some things to make their stuff run better. And that's some of the things I'm going to talk about here. Microsoft also I don't need to go through this. So just a kind of a one pager here. A lot of customers ask, what's the difference between SLES and SLES for SAP? So we're going to talk about all these things kind of on the left here. And in particular, the very last bullet point is most of the things we're going to talk about, the SAP workload specific tooling. But you guys are going to get these slides after this presentation, so you'll know, okay, what is the difference? We have extended service pack support, remote disk encryption, things like that. HA is included with SLES for SAP license, as well as some of the other tools that I'm going to talk about. So real quick at the roadmap. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but originally we were going to stop SLES 15 at SP6. But because 16, which is coming out this summer, is going to be very different, we decided to add an SP7 because SAP customers don't like to hear that something's going to be very different if they have to put it into their SAP landscape. And so we added an SP7, and you can run SLES 15 for a very, very long time. But part of the reason is SLES 16 is going to be, it was originally called the Adaptable Linux Platform. And so basically what we've done with SLES 16 is anything not required to run SAP. Naturally, I'm talking about the version SLES 16 for SAP. There's going to be a version specific to SAP. And now you're going to say, okay, well, we have that today. We have SLES for SAP. Sort of, right? So it is SLES at its core with just some tooling at it, right? We include the HA resource agents, SAP Tune, things like that. But SLES 16, anything not required to run SAP is going to be stripped out of the operating system. And so we expect, not just better performance, but less chances for vulnerabilities if we don't need all that other stuff running on the SAP system's operating system. So we see less chances for vulnerabilities as well. But again, because it's going to be very different, we added an SP7. And if you look at this chart here, we give you plenty of time to test. So, we don't want to freak customers out saying, okay, 16 is going to be very different. Oh no, our SAP stuff may go haywire. We're going to let you run SLES 15 via SP7 until 2037. So we'll give you plenty of time to test, plenty of time to, put it through your processes, your internal processes and whatnot. So again, all the way to 2037. If you choose to run SLES 15, we'll support you until 2037. And like I mentioned, 16 is coming out this summer. If you want to start testing it, we have some customers that said they're going to jump right from SP6 to 16. Great. And so we'll keep our eye on those customers and see how things progress. I don't know if you guys have any SLES 12. I'll just make you aware that as of October last year, it went LTSS, which is, our support that goes beyond what's included with the operating system. But again, I'm not going to go over all this in detail. We're going to leave you with these slides so you can look at them later and make some choices. So these are the kind of areas that we play in at SUSE in the SAP space. Auto tuning, HA, SUSE Manager, which is now called Multi-Linux Manager because it manages more than just SUSE. It was very poorly named from the beginning, if you ask me. That's why we renamed it. Live patching, both kernel and some user space libraries as well. Validation and monitoring via things like Trento and security hardened images. This thing's going crazy. Okay. Anyway, so maybe it's my mouse. So the things that I'm mentioning go all the way from day 0 to day 2, and we're going to touch on all these things as I progress through this presentation. So one of the things that I found kind of odd was ransomware attacks have jumped 5x in SAP systems since 2021. That's not the part I found odd. The part I found odd was that this study just recently came out, even though this been known about for quite a few years. And you think about, hackers and the treasure trove of information that are in SAP systems, your customer data, your master data, your sales data, for example, and your BW system, pretty much anything they can get their hands on in an SAP system is pretty valuable. So what are we doing about that at SUSE? We're really all about security. So we're the only general purpose OS at DAL4 Plus certified. We have SIS and STIG security hardened cloud images. So these are pre-hardened images. If you're running in Azure or GCP or AWS, we have pre-hardened images now that you can deploy. And so on-premise distributions as well, we have plenty of documentation. So why don't we do pre-hardened for on-premises? Because on-premises is going to be very different from customer to customer. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. Whereas in the cloud providers, things are a lot more alike when it comes to the operating system. So anyway, yeah, so we're all about security, and now with live kernel patching and live user space patching, you can go ahead and apply those patches without requiring a reboot. So 99% of the kernel patches anymore do not require a reboot if you're using live kernel patching. It's got to be something really drastic. For example, something that changes the structure of the kernel, like Spectre did some years ago. So you guys know how long it takes to reboot a HANA system. You can apply these kernel patches now without rebooting the system. And like I said, about 99% of them anymore don't require a reboot. But then since then, we've added glibc and OpenSSL also to live patching. So you can now patch those libraries, which are, HANA is very dependent on, without rebooting as well. So we tell customers if you're going to apply these patches, live kernel patching, glibc, OpenSSL, you can run like that for up to a year and then reboot the system or whenever you get a chance in a maintenance window or whatever. That doesn't mean the kernel doesn't, the update doesn't take patch immediately. It does, but we just ask that you reboot the system within a year to kind of clean up all the things that it kind of kicked to the curb.
Al, it's a Tamara from R2i. How long has that live patching been available and being really used in production?
It's been available since SLES 12, so it's been a couple years. glibc and OpenSSL are somewhat new, adding those libraries, and we will continue to add things as well as we continue to develop this tool. I've been asked by customers if we can do the SAP kernel. So that's one actually point I want to clarify. I've had customers say, oh, great, we can patch the kernel of the SAP system without rebooting. That's a different kernel, right? SAP, for some reason, calls their group of executables, SAP S call, dis plus work, all those, NQ, batch, VB1, VB2. They call that the kernel as well. So that's not the kernel we're talking about here with live kernel patching, but we did look at doing SAP as well, but we're not sure that it's worth it because it's very easy to exchange the kernel in an SAP system. And when you think about application servers, for example, you can do rolling upgrades. It's no problem. With clustering, you can do rolling upgrades as well.
Are most of the customers you're working with using the live upgrades?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So live kernel patching used to be, well, it still is a separate product, right? It's not included with SLES for SAP, but we do have packages now where you can bundle live kernel patching with SLES for SAP together at a discounted price. And I know some cloud providers include it with pay as you go. Their subscriptions as well. I don't remember which ones do it, but there are ways to do that as well within the cloud providers. But again, now that you can bundle it, it's become very attractive in price. And like I said, HANA takes a long time to reboot. We're talking, an hour, hour and a half, sometimes with some of these really, really large systems. And so when you get these CVEs, you don't want to say, okay, God, this is a really bad issue that we have to apply a patch to, but we got to wait for our maintenance window. Don't really have to do that anymore. You can apply it and keep on running and not disrupt your systems and affect your SLAs.
Okay, thanks, Al.
You're welcome. So this is, when I think about SUSE, we're the only operating system I know that will do something like this. So this was an SAP problem that we fixed. So because of the tight partnership with SAP and SUSE, we see a problem in there. We don't know when SAP is going to get around to fix it. So we implemented a fix into our operating system. And so what this is, we call this the fast dying index server HA solution. So the issue is when the index server in HANA fails, when it crashes, it takes a really long time for it to fail completely and drain all of its resources. And during that time, HANA is yellow, right? So we're not processing transactions anymore. And there's no reason why the system needs to wait for the index server to completely crash. You can do a reboot immediately and it doesn't affect data integrity or anything else. So what we did, we've implemented a hook into SLES for SAP that as soon as the index server crashes, it will trigger a failover. Why we did this, we have customers that have 20, so it depends on the size of the system, how long it takes for the index server to crash. Just as an example, a 24 terabyte system takes almost an hour and a half for the index server to completely crash. So you add that on top of the time that it takes to reboot the system, and you've got a pretty big outage. So again, we've seen a problem. We don't know when SAP is going to get around to fix it. We fix it in the meantime by implementing this hook into our operating system. And I know this is a badly, it looks like somebody drew this with crayons, but it's actually very important information.
Yeah, Al, I had a question on that. While
Yeah.
it's crashing for that amount of time that it takes, what's the result? You have really poor performance, or?
You can't commit transactions. So it basically
Oh,
sitting
so
there,
it's
not being able to be used.
so it's
Yeah.
actually unavailable and you can't work, but it won't actually switch over right away.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
for some reason it feels it needs to drain all of its resources to do the failover. Something else we've integrated into SLES for SAP. So this was another problem we saw that could have result in data integrity issues. So you have the HANA cockpit operators, and then you have the OS admins, right, with the managing the cluster. And so what the issue was, the HANA cockpit operator has no idea of the state of the cluster. And so the HANA cockpit operator could actually trigger a failover of the HANA database, even if the database is not in maintenance mode or stopped, right? So when you trigger a failover of the HANA database, it needs to be either in maintenance mode or stopped. Otherwise, you could have data integrity issues. So we've implemented a hook into SLES for SAP that if the HANA cockpit operator goes to fail over the cluster and the cluster is not in the correct state, they'll be blocked from doing that, and they'll get a message saying that the cluster is not in the correct state to be failed over. Again, alleviating data integrity issues. You never want to fail over a cluster, especially a database cluster, if it's not in maintenance mode or stopped, because it could lead to very, very bad problems. So one thing I mentioned at the beginning here was, new way of kind of doing things. And so this is an example of that. So we have this new architecture for the ABAP Central Services / NQ replication clusters. And so why we did this was the old way, the cluster, the shared file systems on the cluster are mounted on the primary node. So when a failover happens, the cluster software is in charge of unmounting those shared file systems from the failing node and mounting them on the surviving node. And so what's the issue with that? Well, sometimes the cluster software cannot gracefully unmount the file system on a dying cluster node. So it has to do a force unmount. And that's, again, something that could lead to data integrity issues. So if we come up with this new architecture called Simple Mount, where the shared file systems are actually mounted on both cluster nodes at system boot. And so we have a resource agent that's in charge of the failover, not the cluster software anymore when it comes to the failover, the ABAP Central Services cluster. And so why this works so great is the shared file systems are mounted on both cluster nodes. So in the event of a failure, it just has to switch over to the secondary node. There is no force unmount and remount. The file systems are already mounted on both cluster nodes. And I have some slides, some of these things I'm talking about. I have some information at the end of the deck that has, more information on how to get started, how to implement these solutions, where to look, where's the documentation, things like that I can leave you with. So again, data integrity, right? So you never want to do a forced unmount of a cluster. And that's the old way that it worked. The cluster software would have to do a force unmount on the dying cluster node and then remount that shared file system on the secondary. We don't need to do it like that anymore. It's a much cleaner and a much faster failover because the shared file systems are already mounted on both cluster nodes at system boot. I'm just going to touch on this. These are all the scenarios that we support with HANA and with our HA resource agents. I will tell you multi-target. So we support performance optimized scale up and performance optimized scale out, cost optimized scale up. Multi-target scale up is supported, multi-target scale out, sort of. And that's why I didn't list it here. So multi-target scale out is supported A to B, but not B to C. And I was told by the developers it's actually a very dangerous thing to do, and it's very technically hard to implement that solution. So multi-target scale up, fully supported A to B, B to C, but multi-target scale out, A to B only in the failover scenario. And of course, we've always supported this. I don't even know why I have this slide in here. This is the ABAP Central Services clusters, ENSA 1, ENSA 2, both supported by our HA resource agents for the ABAP Central Services. SUSE Manager, now called SUSE Multi-Linux Manager. So I mentioned, I'm not an expert in all things SUSE Manager because it does a lot, right? It's a salt manager. We have salt states for pretty much anything you can think of in an SAP environment, for deploying NetWeaver, for setting up HANA replication, for setting up HA on the HANA database, pretty much it's a 2-3 hour demo we could give the customers for SUSE Manager. It does a lot. But as far as SAP goes, this is where a lot of our customers see value. So if you look at this slide, I mentioned before live kernel patching, right? So with SUSE Manager, you can actually build update packages and use the filtering option to, for example, build a bunch of, package together a bunch of kernel patches that don't require a reboot, filter out any ones that do require a reboot, bundle them together, and apply them into your SAP landscape, kind of like you do with R3 Trans, right? So bundle up all the ones that don't require a reboot, apply them to dev, everything checks out, push it to QA, and then push it to prod. Again, kind of like you do with R3 Trans with your SAP updates and your Z programs, things like that. And then you could build a package for any ones that do require a reboot, and then, set that up for a maintenance window. But again, this is where I think a lot of customers, especially SAP customers, see a lot of value in SUSE Manager, SUSE Multi-Linux Manager with our lifecycle management capabilities.
So Al, what percentage of the customers you're working with are using Suma, the ones that are got SLES for SAP? I imagine it's pretty high.
It is very high. I hesitate to put a number on it, but I would guess it's 80+%. Because SUSE Manager does, naturally a lot of customers have other tools, but there are some things SUSE Manager does that the other tools can't do. And one of the things now with SUSE Manager, I think it's going to make it more attractive to customers, is the integration into Trento. So these customers that are kind of on the fence with it, when they see Trento, which is, a lot of customers are really excited about this tool that's actually a feature of SLES for SAP. It's not an additional license, not additional cost. When they see the integration with SUSE Manager with Trento, I think it makes it even more attractive.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And so this is why we renamed it. SUSE Manager was a really kind of a poorly named product, because it insinuated it managed SUSE Linux only. And as you can see here from this chart, that's obviously not the case. Pretty much all the popular distributions are supported with SUSE Manager. And SAP Tune. So SAP Tune's a tool that we've developed a few years ago. Before that, it was called SAP Conf. You might be already aware of what SAP Tune does, but we have added new features to it that I'll talk about. But just briefly, what SAP Tune does, it allows you to apply notes to your system. And so you can be proactive, for example. So being in a reactive mode, when you have a problem with an SAP system, what do you do? You go to the SAP knowledge base and you start looking through SAP notes, and you try to find a hit on the issue that you're having. And, it gets pretty complicated sometimes. You read the note, and then at the bottom of the note, it'll say, reference these other, 5 notes. So you have to go start reading all these notes, and it can be very vague as to what exactly needs to be done. So SAP Tune kind of does that for you, where you can run SAP Tune on your system, and it will give you any of the notes that are applicable to your system. Now, these are operating system notes we're talking about here, naturally, right? Not your ABAP programs within the SAP system. We're talking about the operating system and tuning parameters, things like that. And so now we support BobJ, NetWeaver, HANA, application servers, pretty much everything across the board. But one of the new features that we have is platform tagging. And so we implemented that to make sure, especially since we have all these different cloud providers now, and we have multiple platforms you can run on. You can run on Intel, you can run on IBM Power. With the platform tagging, you can tell SAP Tune exactly what you have. So you can say, for example, SAP Tune, NetWeaver, Intel server running on Azure, for example. And that way you'll get only the notes that are applicable to that system. And then, of course, any general ones as well. But the reason why we added the platform tagging was we didn't want to run into an issue where you'd be applying a patch that's meant for a cloud provider when you're running on premises, or vice versa, or a note that's applicable to AWS only, but you're running on Azure, things like that. And then we've also added verify and revert. So verify we added because customers said, okay, I ran SAP Tune, and it returned the command line. Great. Did it actually do it? Right? So we've added a verify feature, make sure that it did what it was supposed to do. And if it did something that you didn't want it to do, we've added revert as well, so you could back it off. And if you've been running it in the past, we originally said don't run it together with TuneD, and we've listened to our customers, and our customers said, well, we're using TuneD for things other than SAP, so it's perfectly okay to run TuneD and SAP Tune on the same system.
How long has SAP Tune been out?
Well, so it was SAP Conf until SLES 11. SAP Tune came out SLES 12.
So it's been a while.
Yep, yeah. But like I said, we've added these features to it, which are somewhat new and important, I think. Like I said, you don't want to be applying a note for Azure on an on-premise system. If it's specific to Azure, you could, I don't know if you break your system, but it could have, bad effects on the system. You
So when
never
are
know, it could
these
break the
newer features were added recently?
Yeah, yeah. So we're SAP Tune version 3.1, verifying revert, I believe, was added in 3.0 last year. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. And thank you for stopping me, because I tend to just, kind of plow ahead and keep yakking until somebody, stops me. Thank you for the questions. Another thing to make you aware of. So we listen to our customers. We've heard a lot of complaints out there with pricing with VMware and whatnot. So we did a lot of work here to get KVM certified and supported for HANA. It's always been supported for the application server tier, but it was not supported in a productive environment until November of last year. And even then it started out kind of slow, like VMware did, where we said, yeah, you can run one VM at a time on a production system, multiple naturally on a non-productive system. You can usually do whatever you want on those. But anyway, so since then we've added multiple KVM HANA production systems running KVM on the same host. We support up to 8 terabytes with transactional and 4 terabytes with analytics, kind of following that same memory to core ratio in the HANA world. But again, it's, we've done a lot of work to get this thing released because, like I said, we've heard a lot of our customers, and they're, with the cost increases in VMware and things like that, they were very unhappy or didn't know what was going on. And so we will continue to add features. So again, I'm going to leave you with these slides. So just keep your eye on those two SAP notes, knowledge base notes. And as we continue to add different things, extended support and things like that, we will be releasing it via the SAP knowledge base.
So
Al,
I just want to do a time check because we're now at it. We've got about 10 minutes left.
All right.
And I was really
in other
hoping
words.
I was really hoping that we could get the Trento stuff.
It's coming. We're almost
Okay,
there, Dan.
okay,
Almost.
okay, sounds good. Okay.
In fact, I better speak about Edge Integration Cell first, and then Trento.
Okay, this works too.
Yeah. This is a this is pretty popular right now. So with PIPO going away in 2027, and I believe it will be 2027 because it's Java based, and SAP has a license to renew with Oracle. And so customers are thinking, well, maybe it's not going to be 2027. Well, I believe it will be because of that, right? They kept pushing the HANA one back because there wasn't enough people out there to do the migrations. That's why that kept getting pushed back 2022, 2023, 2025, whatnot. But anyway, so PIPO are going away. So running the Edge integration suite. So the purpose of this is that you can see here, you have data all over the place, right? In the cloud, on premises, in social networks, mobile apps, business partners, that's why they came up with this integration suite. So you can work on all that data, at the same time and integrate it all together as needed. But it runs in a container. So we have this Edge integration cell. So basically the Edge integration, I kind of worded that wrong. The Edge integration cell runs in a container. BTP runs in the cloud, right? So you have these SAP cloud apps, non-SAP apps, all running in the cloud. And so the problem is that what happens if you need to integrate that data with your on-premises data that you cannot put in the cloud for regulatory reasons or security reasons? So in general, Edge integration cell is it's a hybrid integration runtime. It runs in a container. And like I said, in general, there's no reason companies can't pull data from the cloud into your private landscape, but you can't do the opposite, again, because of security or regulatory reasons. And so how can you combine that data, that's on premise with the data in the cloud? That's the whole reason why they came out with this edge integration cell. It allows you to manage and test your APIs, run integration scenarios, and in general work with, your combined cloud and on-premise data within your private landscape. So again, this is what I believe is going to be the first of many containerized applications coming from SAP. And this is an SAP product. This is not a SUSE product. But when you think about containers, what's missing, right? Especially for customers just getting started with Kubernetes. So, they are getting increasingly popular. There's a lot of things coming out that run in containers, Trento being one of them as a choice. You can either run it in a container or run, on a traditional server installed via RPM. But the issue with containers is security tools don't work well in these environments or don't work at all. And so also it poses new challenges for network security, right? You're moving containers around into different networks, things like that. And then what about tools for observability? What about performance bottlenecks? What about if something happens? How do you spot and identify that problem? And in some cases, trace it back to see, what happened, what were the steps leading up to that issue. And so if you're going to be running mission critical data in these containers, then you're going to need some kind of management platform to do all those things. So we came out with SUSE Rancher for SAP applications. And basically what that is, it's a bundle of software to address all those issues I just talked about. So we have SUSE Security, which was formerly called NuVector, right, for running secure images or secure containers in your environment. We have observability. It was formerly called Stack State. So you can look in and see when you have a problem with one of your containers, for example, you can see what led up to it and remediate it. We got the repository monitoring tool or mirroring tool rather, Rancher Prime, which is our Kubernetes engine for running in containers. So again, this is a bundle of software to address all those things that I mentioned prior, especially good for customers just getting started with Kubernetes to package all this stuff together. And again, virtualization and SUSE storage, kind of have the old names next to the new names here, just so if you're familiar with the older product. So for example, Longhorn is now called SUSE Storage. We did a lot of renaming in the past 6 months and I'm still wrapping my head around it. So that's why I kind of put them side by side. But again,
So just to make, I just want to make a quick comment on something Al said earlier for those who probably are considering the edge cell. As Al mentioned, this is kind of the first application specifically around SAP BTP that's going to be focused on, right? We had to address, SAP had to address the concerns around moving data around between systems, and the edge cell was created to run inside the customer's data center. The other one that kind of probably is going to be highly likely is if you take a look and think about SAP Build Process Automation, you got a similar problem there because data is packaged up with process automation. It gets moved around. And so in many cases, customers don't want that going out to the internet or all over the place. So what'll happen is you'll probably see something like that, right? I don't know for sure, but I think you'll start to see many of those applications. Even though BTP is a cloud offering, what'll happen is you'll probably see the runtime engines with things like this, like the edge cell, which will all be based around Kubernetes, etc. So, sorry, just wanted to drop that line because I know.
And I wanted to drop. We did a POC at a client. It was for federal government, and we turned on the SUSE security, and immediately they saw passwords going out in the open because they were kept in the containers. It's the only tool that looks inside the containers that way.
Yeah, one of the things I didn't mention, I don't know what happened to the slide. When I was talking about SUSE Manager, I know there was concerns about, connecting servers to the internet. And so I had the slide on using the RTM, the remote monitoring tool that we use with SUSE Manager, where that is the only server that has to connect to the internet, and then SUSE Manager, and it gets the updates from our customer center. And then on the other side, your servers connect to that. I don't know what happened to that slide, Tamara.
Might be in the Trento section.
I guess we'll see. I don't know what happened to it. I guess we kept adding things to this deck and then things got shuffled around. But anyway, as we're talking about this, I believe is going to be the first of many. We've actually, SUSE has made a huge investment together with SAP into containerized environments. And, you know, some make sense. I'm not sure you're going to see a large HANA database running in a container anytime soon, but what about the application servers? They're actually doing it. They just don't support it right now for their customers. I know there's an issue that they're trying to fix. So when you generate your SAP license key, it uses that burned in long number that's on one of your servers, for example, to generate the license key. And for some reason, that's not portable. It is with VMware, but for some reason, it's not with containers. But, you know, I tell customers, if you really want to get your feet wet with it, just run your message server in a VM or in a physical environment and put application servers in containers. We actually have a white paper showing how to do that. But anyway, I better get going here. Not that I mean I'm going to leave the call, meaning I better get going with the slides. So I did want to talk about Trento. So this is, it's about 3 years old, but we've added a lot to it. So the whole reason why this project started was because our support, Microsoft's Azure SAP support, Amazon's SAP support, getting inundated with calls with customers when their clusters were not failing over correctly. And so when you think about when you set up a cluster, there's dozens and dozens of parameters that have to be set correctly for CoroSync and Pacemaker and file versions, you know, dozens of these parameters. And so when you install the cluster, the installation does that for you, right? It sets all those parameters and then you test it, everything's working great. And then what happens, right? 6 months, 7 months, a year goes by, things get added, service packs get put on, applications get added, things change within the system, and all of a sudden something changed that shouldn't, and it comes time for a failover, and the failover doesn't work as planned, or it takes a very long time, or it just doesn't work at all. So that's why we came out with this product called Trento. And this is included with SLES for SAP. It's actually a feature of SLES for SAP. So if you have a SLES for SAP license, you're not only entitled to the product, but you're entitled to support for the product as well as part of your SLES for SAP license. And so it's an open web console. It's a single point of entry. It's right now, it's a look but don't touch. So it's great for help desks and things like that. I'd love to give you guys a live demo of this. We have a very large SAP landscape with scale up, scale out, HANA, application servers with the Java stack, ABAP Central Services clusters, you name it. But anyway, so basically the agent looks into the SAP profile. So it's basically auto discovering. It knows how the systems are connected together. And so if it sees an issue, it will come up with a critical error warning against that issue on the particular server. And so, you know, like I mentioned, auto discovers the SAP systems and clusters. It's installed on the agent via RPM. There's one file that has to be edited, the agent.yaml file. Once that's done, it starts reporting to the Trento server within seconds. And basically, it's looking at your system, it's checking those dozens and dozens of parameters that have to be set correctly for your clusters to work as planned. And now it actually does more than that. I'm going to get into that in a minute. But the whole reason why we came out with this tool is that if one of those parameters, especially critical parameter, goes out of spec or out of best practices, it will tell you that you know, hey, you have a problem, and it does support email alerting. So for example, here, you know, it digs deeper into the SAP systems. You can see the whole SAP landscape here for the application server tier and the database. It supports scale up, scale out, and ABAP Central Services clusters for the cluster checks. And then it does a lot more than that. We'll get into that here in a minute. I know we're running out of time. But basically, if it sees a problem, it will tell you what the problem is. So here we see, you know, CoroSync timeout was set, not set, obviously, to the expected value. So that triggered a critical issue here. And then if you look into it, it tells you not only what the problem is, but it will tell you how to fix it. And so that's kind of a light error, but anyway, but it is critical, right? So if this isn't set correctly, when it comes time for the host to fail over, the HANA database to fail over, it's not going to work. And then there's some other checks that go into a lot more detail. So that was kind of a light parameter check that needed to be changed. But then there's some other ones that are a lot deeper than that. And so we give you reference material as well. So if you have an issue like this one here about the two-node parameter not set as recommended, it will tell you not only how to fix it, but if you say, okay, why does it need to be set like that? Depending on your platform, you could go in and dig deeper into the issue. And as you can see here, we support, if it's in Azure, KVM, GCP, on premises, AWS, Nutanix, VMware, all support it with these cluster checks and the monitoring. Also, it integrates into now with SAP Tune. So I mentioned SAP Tune. It integrates with SAP Tune now, so you can come here and see here any of the SAP Tune notes that you've applied to this particular system. It tells you the ones that should be applied and the ones that are applied. And if actually these are hotspots, if you click on one of these, it will take you to the knowledge base to tell you what that parameter is, what that OSS note is, and tell you what you've applied to your system. And it also now integrates with SUSE Manager, where it will show you any CVEs that need to be applied to the system and any upgrade packages that need to be applied to this system. And I know we're out of time here, so I'm just going to kind of wrap this up, but I will offer to you guys, if you want me to do a live demo of Trento in the near future, I'd be happy to do that for you because it is generating a lot of customer excitement because of what it does and helps you alleviate, problems basically before they happen. And again, include it with your sleds for SAP license at no additional cost.
How easy is this to install and get going with?
So there's the Trento agent itself goes naturally on the SAP systems, and that's installed via RPM, zipper, and it started and stopped via systemctl. There's one file on there that has to be edited. It's the etc Trento agent.yaml file. And basically, there's just two places there that you put in the name of the Trento server. And then there's an API key that's generated on the Trento server. And so customers say, okay, well, we got 100 SAP systems. We're going to have to do that. Well, if you're using SUSE Manager, that file is identical on all of the SAP systems. So you can configure that file once and push it out to all of your SAP systems. And now the Trento server on the other side is very light, 4 gig of RAM, 64 gig of storage, a couple of, I think 2 cores, something like that. But anyway, that you can either install in a container via K3S or a full-blown, K8 Kubernetes environment, or it can be installed via RPM. So you have a choice. You can either install it in a container or install it, the traditional way. I would tell you the Trento server, especially once the operating system is installed, you're going to have this up and running in 5 minutes. It's really that easy to get it up and running. There's a couple ports that have to be open, HTTP, HTTPS, and the advanced message queuing port, and that's basically it.
And so you don't have to have access to the internet all the time, which is a big issue, as we know.
Correct. Right. So the Trento server itself, can get its updates via, SUSE Manager. So again, I mentioned before the RMT server.
Yeah.
In conjunction with SUSE Manager. The RMT server can connect to our customer center, can only be the only machine connected to the customer center, getting all the updates. And then on the other side of that, in your firewall, you can have all the other systems getting their updates from the RMT server. Again, I don't know what happened to the
Thanks,
slide.
Al.
Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
I flipped it over because we were going over time, so I wanted to be respectful of everybody's time.
That's okay.
So
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Feel free to reach out to myself. We're going to send a link out. We'll send a link out for a recording. We'll also send the link out for the presentation unless it's ready. You could go ahead and contact me at my email, or you can also send it to the generic email info@r2i.ca if you have additional questions. If you want to get into a full, I know we kind of ran out of time. The Trento piece, we could basically spend a whole hour on going through a whole demonstration. happy to set something up. Feel free, contact me. I can pull Al in and Mike as needed. So
I see Kim put in the chat that we can download the presentation, but I don't see the link, Kim, for the presentation.
yeah.
Yeah,
need the
sorry, I
link.
was on mute. It's downloading. It should be there in a few seconds. Sorry about the delay.
The link. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so if
And-
it's not there, we'll also send, we can, yeah, the link will be available for folks to download.
And do
Thank you.
folks have any questions? Can they unmute themselves and just ask questions or raise their hands, Kim?
Yes, yes, they can ask the question. They can use the chat, or they can raise their hand and we can allow them to talk.
And real quick, like Dan mentioned, I'd be happy to do a Trento demo for you guys. Give me an hour, and we can go over it. And like I said, I've done demos for a lot of customers, but also SAP Tech Connect, Sapphire. It's been very well received, and best part is when you tell customers they don't have to pay for it, and with their SLES for SAP license, but also when they see what it can do. I've had customers say, we had a issue with our HANA database not failing over, a month ago, and we had to go digging around looking for that one parameter that was wrong. This tool will actually do it for you.
And we talked in the beginning of the presentation about the actual migration to S/4HANA. What are some of the common pitfalls that you've seen customers on their migration route?
Are you asking me or the general?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Cleaning up, getting rid of things you don't need, archiving. Sometimes an SAP will tell you this flat out, if you can go greenfield, you put it this way, sometimes with what they've done, the customers have done to their systems, they won't get the full value out of S4, even out of HANA, doing that, unless you do a greenfield type of deployment. But if customers really know what they're doing, and like I said, do a lot of cleanup and not worry about custom coding that could prevent the migration from going smoothly, things like that. So it's basically a lot of testing ahead of time. And like I said, I think cleaning up is the biggest thing, because now you're going to squash everything and put it into memory, right? So it's not like, oh, we have plenty of disk space, let's just put everything out there. And no, everything needs to run in memory for HANA to perform the way it's supposed to. And so if too much stuff, too much fluff out there, that can cause an issue. And then when it comes to BW, especially with scale out with HANA, master data has to fit on the primary node. And so if it's too large, you actually can't migrate. And we had that with one of our big hardware providers, their internal system. So they had a lot of cleaning up to do before they could migrate to HANA.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. The presentation is there to download now if you want. We'll also be sending out a follow-up link for the recording, etc.
The row store data meant, by the way, on the BW thing. All the row store data has to fit on the primary node. Anyway,
Thanks.
yeah.
Thanks, everyone. And a lot of the attendants stayed we ran late. So thank you very much, everybody.
Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah, appreciate it.